Good morning, folks. The family of the two Australians killed in the Germanwings plane disaster are visiting the scene of the crash in the French Alps. Their emotional pilgrimage comes as Australian Airlines agree to new rules to tighten cockpit security on planes. More on those changes in a moment with aviation expert Greg Bamber. But first, let's get an update on what's happening in the Alps from our reporter Amelia Ballinger. Amelia, very sad scenes there today.
Yeah, very, very sad, Carl. Carol Friday's brother Malcolm Coram and his daughters Georgina and Philippa made the journey to France during what must be a very difficult time for their family. Mr. Coram and his daughters visited the memorial that's been set up for the crash victims, and after laying some flowers and reading some messages, Mr. Coram said that he now knows the true meaning of the words grief-stricken. He also said that his family was struggling to come to terms with the fact that the crash had been deliberate. He said, "We have decided to treat this as an accident at this stage and thus deny the perpetrator his wishes. It's better off being calm. There is no point being angry. It's happened." Mr. Coram went on to say that he also feels sorry for the parents of Andreas Lubitz, and that comes as we've learnt new details about the co-pilot today. The German prosecutor investigating the case has said that Mr. Lubitz was being treated for suicidal tendencies before he received his pilot's licence, but that he wasn't being treated for anything of that nature recently. Carl?
Amelia, thank you for that. So now let's move on to some of those changes with our airlines. From a practical point of view, I guess there are questions being raised from pilots about that, but from a logistical point of view, in terms of what you are, how you are viewing it, what do you think? First up.
Well, it was important to respond to the tragedy in the French Alps, of course, and the regulators are taking the appropriate steps. But it's also vital that this isn't seen just as a knee-jerk reaction, and that the stakeholders are consulted, because they have to own the changes, and the pilots, the flight attendants, the unions that represent them have got to be brought in the loop and thoroughly consulted about the practicalities of this change so they can make it work in practice.
That being said, Greg, and with the greatest respect, what's knee-jerk about trying to prevent something like this happening again?
Well, some of the pilots are saying this is a bit of a knee-jerk reaction, saying there've got to be two people in the cockpit at all time. Some of the pilots have been saying to me overnight that when they call for a flight attendant to come into the cockpit because they want to get up and stretch their legs, go to the loo, that the flight attendants are busy with their operational work. Have the flight attendants been trained? A lot of training and development is going to be necessary so that a senior flight attendant can replace a pilot in the cockpit.
Yeah, I think there are all sorts of practical things here, and look, we can all sit outside it and judge it from our perspective, but we don't have the knowledge, the intimate knowledge that they do, so maybe we do need to let them go about their business and try and work out what is best. The flip side of this, the other argument here is, what are we doing to monitor pilots? What are we doing to monitor senior flight attendants? I don't know whether it's going to be a massive imposition on them, but to have tests and psychological tests and to make them public to the airline, I would have thought was a practical way forward as well.
Well, that's a very good point, but it's vital that the airlines try and develop a culture which moves away from the command and control culture that many of them have inherited from their military forebears, if you like, and to move towards a no-blame culture so that people can disclose if they have health issues, whether they're mental health, whether they're eyesight or whatever, and not be afraid that they're going to immediately lose their job. Airlines and other employers have got to put in place great safety cultures which are more consultative and more relying on teamwork, so that people will work more effectively as teams than perhaps they've sometimes done up to now.
I understand that, but having a look at what happened in this case, this man was seeing a doctor and was being treated for what they say were suicidal tendencies, and the airline wasn't aware of that, it seems, at this point. And so there has to be disclosure, surely, with jobs of this responsibility at some point, doesn't there?
Well, that's right, but it's got to be done in a very sensitive way.
I understand.
And that's why the culture has to be a safety culture, because airlines and other employers often say that safety is their #1 priority, but as they're writing that in their annual reports, often they've got both eyes on the bottom line, and changing the standard operating procedures obviously incurs costs for the airlines, and the airlines which have shareholders are also looking to maximise their profitability. So there's a real balance that needs to be struck between maintaining a safety culture on the one hand and also ensuring the economic viability of the airline on the other hand.
Well, I think all eyes on the airlines at the moment, and I'm looking for, certainly some lead from Qantas in all of this, the world's safest airline. I'll be interested to see what they come up with. I'm sure it will be measured. Thank you very much for that, Greg. We'll talk to you very soon. Interesting information there.
Cheers.